and for those who are just now joining, welcome to the live stream. I'm just going to be, this is going to be a little bit different from our previous live streams. I've been doing a lot of gaming, obviously, because politics gaming, I guess. But today I just decided to do something different, in which that we are going to be discussing the news, politics, geopolitics. We're going to be looking through the administration of Joe Biden. We're going to be discussing about what is going on with the U.S. presidency and more. So if you guys have any suggestions, or just if there's anything that you know that's going on, feel free to talk about it in the chat. And then other than that, we'll go ahead and get right into it. So today, first off, we are going to be discussing something that a lot of you guys probably know about. We are going to be discussing, let me go ahead and get this over. We are going to be discussing the situation in Turkestan, or not Turkestan, it is Xinjiang. We are going to be discussing about the genocide that is currently going on in the Xinjiang region of China. China denies that this is going on, but obviously many different reports and a lot of freelance journalists that are in the region do acknowledge that this is actually going on. Canada yesterday did decide to, by their parliament, declared that the treatment of the Uyghurs, that you call the native people that are from Xinjiang, that they have decided that that is a genocide. Basically the position a lot of countries are taking is that yes, it is a genocide. And I've been watching this go on for ever since it happened. Let's go ahead and read a little bit of this. The motion passed 266-0. No one voted against the motion. It was supported by all opposition parties and a handful of lawmakers from the governing Liberal Party. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and most members of his cabinet abstained from the motion. And the motion takes make Canada just the second country after the United States to recognize China's actions as a genocide. The United States did recognize it. I actually remember this now. The music is louder than my voice. Yeah, whatever. I don't know why my voice is not that loud. Let me actually turn my voice up for you guys. Sorry about that. That should be better. Actually get a little bit closer to the mic. Reduce the music to 0.25 of the audio. Yeah, I get it. I get it now. Thank you so much. Alright, that should be a little better. But anyway, lawmakers also voted to pass the amendment asking Canada to call on the International Olympic Committee to move the 2022 Olympics from Beijing if the Chinese government continues this genocide. This was actually, I think the last, so the last Olympic Games to be boycotted, I believe, was the 1980 Olympic Games, and that was after the subsequent invasion of Afghanistan. After the Soviet Union launched a massive invasion into Afghanistan in order to keep the communist government from falling into the hands of the rebels that were rising up against the Afghan government, and that ended up being the Mujahideen, and a lot of you guys probably know exactly what happened in Afghanistan, because that was whenever the United States ended up, audio needs to be a bit lower than your voice, yeah, I get it. But anyway, let's keep reading on with this. Is there a buffering issue going on in, actually there's not. Okay, this live stream is going perfectly, I believe. China responded late on Tuesday saying it condemned and rejected Canada's motion, according to Reuters. It quoted Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Weibin saying that China has lodged stern representations with Canada. Mr. Trudeau has so far been hesitant to label China's actions against the Uyghur minority in a in Xinjiang as a genocide, calling the term extremely loaded, and is saying a further examination was needed before a decision could be made. Just one member of his cabinet, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Marc Renault, appeared in Parliament for the vote. Speaking in the House of Commons, Mr. Renault said, if I'm saying that wrong, please let me know. He said that he abstained on behalf of the government of Canada. And then going on in an open letter to Mr. Trudeau earlier this month, asking him to stand up against China. Mr. O'Toole noted that the recent banning of the BBC News Worldwide from China, a decision that followed a BBC report alleging systematic rape, sexual abuse, and torture in China's re-education camps in Xinjiang. Monday's non-binding motion marks the latest escalation in Canada-China relations, which have soured over recent years. So basically, what are you guys' thoughts on what is going on right now? Do you think that what is going on in Xinjiang is a genocide, or do you think that China is really just doing nothing wrong? And I've actually, again, I've done a little bit more research. This stream on my end is just kind of acting a little bit weird. My internet's not the strongest, so if you guys are seeing any issues, please let me know. But I don't think anything's going wrong. But basically, on one hand, we have two sides. We have one that basically a lot of the international community is saying that this is a genocide. On the other hand, there basically is an argument, especially on the Chinese side, is that China is trying to erase the racial boundaries that exist inside of their country. And a lot of people would call that xenophobic. Basically, whenever you don't believe that there should be any racial boundaries, or if you want to erase that by systematic government mandate, then that would be considered xenophobic. And a lot of people do acknowledge, and especially on the left and the right, they do acknowledge that that is a xenophobic move. But China's argument is basically that they want to make sure that that there are basically, I guess, no cultural minorities, and there's even a policy in Xinjiang, basically, where they're paying people to have babies in Xinjiang. They're also paying non-Uyghur people from, I think it's like Han Chinese. They're paying non-Uyghur Han Chinese to come into Xinjiang and then have babies with those that are native to the country. So, and again, that's where the argument comes in on whether they should call it a genocide or not, because of just, I mean, it's kind of like it has the boundaries of a genocide, but then the government is saying that it's not a genocide. But there are, again, already 2 countries in the world that have identified it and then said, yes, there is a genocide going on, including the Parliament of Canada. However, the Canadian government has said that there is no genocide going on yet. They are not acknowledging it yet. But then the United States government, but it was not the Biden administration. Well, I'm just going to make it clear that it was not the Biden administration that actually declared it a genocide. It was actually the Trump administration before that did declare it a genocide, and that was the previous Department of State that declared it, and the guy's name is getting away from me. Let me actually, the guy's name is getting away from me, so let me go and check. Someone's probably gonna say this name before me. Anthony Blinken, Mike Pompeo. It was Mike Pompeo that did declare it a genocide on behalf of the United States government. So that is, still somewhat the policy of the United States government. And then someone asked, what do you think of the Joe Biden presidency so far? And then that's whenever I'm going to go ahead and transition in to the Biden administration. So the Biden administration just appointed a brand new representative to the United Nations, that were not representative, but ambassador to the United Nations. So basically, the ambassador of the United Nations that was just confirmed by, let me look, ambassador to the UN, and I'm trying to get her name here. Linda Thomas Greenfield was confirmed as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations by the U.S. Senate. Basically, Linda Thomas Greenfield was under a lot of controversy during this her appointment period, and then while she was being confirmed, she was confirmed 78-20. That was a lot of Republicans that had to cross over party boundaries just to be able to confirm her. So it looks like it was not really nearly unanimous, but I mean that's nearly 80-20. So following her swearing in, she will travel to New York and is expected to present her credentials to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And then basically, I'm trying to find... She said, just trying to find her quote, because she made a couple of things about the Xinjiang situation. And this is whenever it comes to what the policy is by the Biden administration on whether they are going to continue to identify this as a genocide. So let's go ahead and bring this over here. President Joe Biden's choice for U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, should make promoting respect for human rights a top priority at the United Nations. This means delivering on her promise to aggressively counter what she described as China's malign efforts in New York, while restoring the United States' role as a trusted voice on human rights. And then Thomas will want to abandon many policies the Trump administration pursued at the UN, like stripping out references to women's sexual and reproductive health and human rights from UN text, but Thomas Greenfield does not need to throw all Trump-led approaches. There is room for continuity on issues like China and Syria. And then we have monitor of China's human rights abuses. The Senate is scheduled to start consideration of the nomination. Already been confirmed, so this was before she was even confirmed. She was peppered with questions about a 2019 speech she gave that several senators criticized as unduly gentle toward the Chinese government. She dismissed that speech as mistaken and vowed to resist Beijing's efforts to increase its influence at the United Nations. Their success depends on our continued withdrawal, she said. That will not happen on my watch. So it looks like there is a hardline approach that is happening from the Biden administration. However, it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like, they say they're going to do that, but it's until they actually start doing it whenever people can kind of confirm that that's what they want to do. So Human Rights Watch has documented Beijing's systematic efforts to undermine UN human rights mechanisms in New York and at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. China has engaged in manipulation of the UN review processes, harassment, and intimidation of human rights defenders from China, as well as United Nations rights experts and staff. It has tried to use its growing influence to block the precipitation of independent civil rights groups into UN meetings and conferences. The Trump administration was right to support Britain and Germany in drawing attention to Beijing's arbitrary detention of over 1 million Uyghurs and Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang. The coalition of countries willing to brave Chinese retaliation and condemn its abuses in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Tibet at the United Nations has been growing, while the ranks of those willing to praise Beijing have been shrinking. Thomas Greenfield should be should make expanding the coalition of nations willing to speak out against Beijing's human rights abuses at the UN and creating a standing international mechanism to monitor China's ongoing grave violations one of her chief goals. So it looks like that Greenfield does want to fight this a growing influence by the CCP. I'm going to go ahead and try to get used to calling them the CCP, because I'm in my view, I believe that the CCP is a very grave threat to not only American security, but world security. The amount of influence that they have been gaining, and especially the administration that is there in China right now, is not going to help us in the future. There's always room for negotiation. There's always room for doing things that will possibly help, in the short term and possibly long term. But whenever it comes to negotiating, do we want to negotiate with Hitler? Or do we want to negotiate and say, hey, we're drawing a line in the sand, and if you don't abide by that, then we're going to take action against you? China is doing things not just in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. What they've been doing in Hong Kong is despicable. But then they're also basically, and if I actually can do this, let me actually pull up this dispute. And a lot of you guys probably know about this dispute right here. We're gonna look up this little probably not very well-known dispute right here. So, according to the South China Morning Post, which is a CCP funded and controlled news outlet, South China Morning Post, probably take what you hear from this with a grain of salt, because the CCP wants to ask for my cookies, and I don't want to give them my cookies. Vietnam has been building up its defenses in the Spratly Islands over the past 2 years to ensure it can strike Chinese facilities. See, it's kind of like they're kind of putting it in a way about like what they're gonna do against Chinese. In disputed archipelago, a report by the Washington-based think tank said emplacements for air and coastal defense systems have been installed on most of Vietnam's bases in the Spratlys, with most significant upgrades at the West Reef and Sinco Island. According to the report released on Friday by the Center for Strategic and International Studies Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, it said that recent building work underscored Vietnam's efforts to make facilities in the area more resilient against China and to make sure Chinese bases are within striking range. And then both countries lay claim to the Spratlys in the... I really hate this ad. I hate that. It's probably even worse than the Grubhub meme. Both countries lay claim to the Spratlys in the South China Sea, claims that overlap with those of the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. They're calling it Taiwan instead of Chinese Taipei. And occupy the outpost there. Beijing claims that almost all of the South China Sea intentions have escalated over its increasing assertiveness in the region, which has become a flashpoint with the United States. Also, by the way, if the South China Morning Post is or is not a CCP controlled, let me actually look real quick. How to age well. Yeah. I want to know who owns them. We'll look at it later. Just so I can do a correction, just in case they're not controlled by the CCP. According to the report, the recent upgrades at the West Reef and Sinco followed the established pattern seen by other Vietnamese outposts in the Spratlys. So there are a lot of countries that do lay claim to the region, and China basically, it was like as if they just kind of like got a marker and then drew a line from Taiwan. They lay claim to Taiwan already. It's like as if they just kind of drew a line from Taiwan all the way down right to where Malaysia is, and then all the way back up right through Vietnam's territorial waters and then back up to their border again. So that's kind of like where it's coming to, is that China is basically building these bases, and I think there was a couple of countries that were probably doing it before, but China has been the one that's been doing it the most aggressively. And usually if you're doing one or two actions, you know, they kind of don't want to do anything against you because I mean, the strategic value of it doesn't really make sense in the larger scale. But what they're calling it, and this is an action that has been taken by both the CCP and the Republic of China, ROC, basically, they call it salami slicing. And that's basically that the theory in geopolitics that a few different actions that seem small in scale will end up having a larger outcome in the future. So again, that is called salami slicing. And let me actually get a actual definition for you guys. And so salami slicing, just as I said before, refers to the series of many small actions often performed by clandestine means that is accumulated whole, that as an accumulated whole produces a much larger action result that would be difficult or unlawful to perform all at once. The term is typically used pejoratively, although salami slicing is often used to carry out illegal means. It is only a strategy for gaining an advantage over time by accumulating it in small increments, and then so it can be used in a legal means as well. In politics, they said they accused the Russian government of salami slicing tactics. We have seen physical reality in the energy markets, with the Russian government deliberately salami slicing those markets in order to salami slice alliances. And then with China, there's actually even a new page for it. It refers to a series of small actions performed by China, the People's Republic of China, and Taiwan, or the Republic of China, none of which serves as a casus belli by itself, that cumulatively produces a much larger action result in favor, blah, 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 blah. I already read that. And then it's called the String of Pearls in the Indian Ocean region, considered by some Indian commentators as an area traditionally with Indian influence, as a manifestation of China's salami slicing strategy by supporting and allying with its neighboring nations such as Pakistan and Sri Lanka, who are usually at odds with China. And then the other thing that they are doing is, again, they're doing the salami slicing technique all over the South China Sea, in which that they are, if I can actually get a map here, it doesn't look like they actually have a map, but let me actually check. Whoops. Am I going to be able to do this? All right, let's go. I'm going to be a little bit better, just so you guys kind of know what I'm talking about. So again, the salami slicing technique is China basically saying all of this is ours, and they call it China's 9-dash line, that they drew a line basically from Hainan and the border of China with Vietnam all the way down over to Malaysia and Brunei, and it said all of this is ours. And then Taiwan has been doing the same thing, in which they claim that territory, and then both countries have basically been building on those islands that, in the South China Sea. If you actually look at a picture right here, you've probably seen this picture before. This is basically what the Chinese have been doing, is that they have been sending ships to create these islands. So if you're asking, what are the geopolitical aspects of these actions? And basically, the geopolitical kind of consequences of this, it's always going to come down to geopolitics. And basically, one of the issues of it is that not only can the Chinese basically say all of this is ours, basically it comes down to UN rules and regulations. There's a rule and regulation basically where they say anything that is about 30 kilometers, I believe it is 30 kilometers, and then 300 kilometers from your territorial waters, from your anything that is claimed or controlled by you. your country that is recognized by the United Nations. They call it an economic exclusive zone or area or whatever they call it. Basically, what that means is that if the CCP, People's Republic of China, were to lay claim and control these islands right here, basically total control over the sea that surrounds that area, and about $5 trillion worth of economic goods comes through the South China Sea. This is one of the busiest economic zones in the world, and that's why there is so much claim and issue over this area, is because of the amount of economic wealth that comes through this area, not only by China, by Vietnam, by Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, Taiwan. Every single country probably has a couple of ships that come through this every month. So the amount of basically geopolitical control that you would have over this area interests places like China, because China, 20 years ago, they were not seen as one of the foremost up-and-coming countries. A lot of people knew about 20 years ago that China was probably going to be one of the richest countries in the world, and they were right in that aspect. But a lot of people couldn't really predict that China was going to be building bases, and Vietnam and Philippines were going to be building bases in areas like this in the South China Sea. They knew the South China Sea was going to be a flashpoint, but in this aspect, they probably couldn't predict it. So this kind of does change a couple of things that it's just kind of like they're building, and especially the Chinese. It's not really, and I mean, there's claims that Vietnam is doing it, but we already know that the Vietnamese and the Chinese are building bases in these on these islands, and then basically what they are doing there is that they could, in theory, use those islands as forward operating bases and then use them militarily, and then say, if you come through this area, whether military ship, then we're going to fire on you. And then that's inadvertently going to cause a war, again, a flashpoint in the South China Sea. Let me go ahead and been talking for a little bit, so let me go ahead and go through chat. Xinjiang is the Chinese name for East Turkestan. Yeah, I was actually correct on Turkestan, I guess. Definitely genocide from what I know, says Archie. Election motion says it is an ethnic cleansing happening in Xinjiang. Jeffrey brings up, y'all, I am in shock. Apparently the F-35 program was a complete failure. That's a little bit of a... I think a lot of people have figured out that the F-35 program is a failure. It's a great jet, but like the cost overruns have just been astronomical. I mean, how much have we spent on it? Like not five. We've spent like $1 trillion. A person, thank you so much, $5. I've just read an article by Roll Call said that China is likely to attack Taiwan in the next 5 years. How do you think Biden would deal with that? That is actually one of the biggest things about Joe Biden that I've actually been a little bit worried about, is what his policy on Taiwan was going to be. Let me actually go ahead and bring up a couple of things. And he actually, as soon as he got into office, he actually did this. So one of the things about Taiwan is that there is a lot of talk about China actually invading Taiwan. And I'm not going to go through the history because I'm going to assume that a lot of you guys already know what the history about Taiwan was. But basically, one of the things that has happened throughout the past 50, 60 years with the United States, Taiwan, and China is that when it comes to China directly threatening Taiwan, this became known as the First, Second, and Third Taiwan Strait crises. The first one happened in 1948, sometime between 1948 and 1952. It's going to be sometime around there. The second Taiwan crisis happened in about the 1960s, and then the third Taiwan Strait crisis happened in the 90s. All three of these Taiwan Strait crises happened whenever the Chinese basically started directly attacking the Taiwanese. And then this caused the United States to come in and then send ships through the Taiwan Strait and then say, if you continue your actions and if you invade Taiwan, we are going to fight for Taiwan. And this has been the policy of the United States. However, the United States policy has never been to directly engage or even talk to the Taiwanese. However, we've always had their back. So one of the things that happened after Donald Trump was elected in 2016 was that he directly got a call from the president of Taiwan. I'm missing her name, but it's a woman. It's a female president of Taiwan. I think she's the first female president of Taiwan. But basically what happened is that the Taiwanese contacted Donald Trump and then said, hey, we congratulate you, you know, just it was just a regular congratulations call for winning your election. So the president of Taiwan decided to call president-elect at the time, Trump, and then say congratulations on winning your election. This angered the Chinese immensely because that was the first time that any high-level official of the United States, this, you know, it wasn't directly a president of the United States, but it was a president-elect. And especially it was the first time that a president-elect has taken a call from the president of Taiwan. And this angered the Chinese because in Chinese policy, basically, they call it Chinese Taipei. Basically, Taiwan is a rogue province that needs to be taken control of very soon in the future. And that is especially the policy of President Xi Jinping, who basically says that Taiwan is not a free country and that they basically see Taiwan as more of an extension of Hong Kong. You know, it's one country, two systems, and that they see Taiwan as the second system. And I mean, one country, two systems was actually, you know, the policy that the Chinese were supposed to hold against not Taiwan, but a Hong Kong. But you obviously see what the Chinese have done to Taiwan or Hong Kong in that regard. So one of the things about Joe Biden is that the policy that Joe Biden is saying that he's going to practice with Taiwan is something known, and let me go ahead and bring it up real quick. This was called, and trying to figure it out. If someone can actually tell me in the chat, because I'm just give me a second here, lads. Anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and describe it without really, you know, calling it what it's called. So basically, one of the things about Taiwan is that the United States has had the policy that the United States have basically had the policy that if anything were to happen to Taiwan, we would defend them. And then George W. Bush actually said this in 2001 after taking office. If Taiwan were attacked by China, do we as the United States have the obligation to defend the Taiwanese? So a reporter asked him, and then President Bush responded, yes, we do. The Chinese must understand that. The United States would do whatever it took to help Taiwan defend itself. He made it understood that though we and China and the United States have common interests, the Chinese must understand that there will be some areas where we can disagree on. And then basically what that is called is that the United States basically before, and then there's always been these little spats basically where the United States kind of like breaks this policy, and then they call it basically that we're not going to directly engage with the Taiwanese. We're not going to directly say what we're going to do with the Taiwanese if they were attacked by the Chinese. But then if they were sometimes, you know, just like Bush and then Trump, sometimes there's always a president that comes in and then directly says, you know, this is what we're going to do. And the only thing that really does is that it really just kind of like just angers the Chinese, but then the Chinese can't really do anything about it. At least before they couldn't do anything about it, and then now they have the means and willpower and firepower especially to be able to do something about it. I see a war between China and Canada in the near future because China holding these two Michaels hostage, and Canada will bring other NATO countries into the war. If you could actually talk about the two Michaels hostages, I actually have not heard about that issue. So if you could actually explain on about it. But basically, there was also another issue, or not issue, but basically the Biden administration made a comment and then said, like, what we're going to do with the Taiwanese, we're not going to say, because we've always had the policy that we are not going to, you know, openly say what we're going to do. So Biden seems to be the one to say that, you know, we're not going to say what we're going to do, but basically he seems like he's going to do something if something were to happen to Taiwan. So that's let me actually pull up a story about it. So we actually a pretty interesting article. Let me actually pull this up from Slate Magazine. Then I'm going to pull this up. We're going to read through this. How long can the Biden administration stall a crisis in Taiwan? There's no relationship between the two countries on Earth quite like between the United States and Taiwan. The island nation is America's 9th largest trading partner and one of the main global customers for U.S. arms exports. As containing China's regional ambitions has become a guiding aim of U.S. policy in East Asia, the defense of Taiwan, with its strategically vital location, has grown in importance. As a now consolidated democracy, Taiwan enjoys strong bipartisan support in Taiwan and Washington, and its remarkably successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic has only boosted its public image. But for all that support, official U.S. policy does not recognize Taiwan as an independent nation. The Chinese government in Beijing considers the island part of its own territory and does not recognize the legitimacy of the modern nation of Taiwan, officially known as the Republic of China. The blah, 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 blah. It goes through the history of it. Already know the history. That year, it became the official U.S. position that the government of the United States acknowledges that the Chinese position that there is all but one China, and Taiwan is part of China. Every administration has nominally adhered to the so-called One China policy since then. Rather than the unofficial embassy, a nonprofit known as the American Institute in Taiwan represents U.S. interests in Taipei. This is a strange and hypocritical arrangement, but one that has benefited both the United States and Taiwan. Taiwan has maintained its de facto independence, unlike Hong Kong and Macau. Taiwanese citizens and institutions are mostly free from Beijing influence, and recent decades have brought a transition to democracy and rising prosperity. Basically, what this means are in recent decades have brought a transition to democracy. Basically, what had happened is that after 1949, after the Taiwanese basically retreated from mainland China into Taiwan, basically what had happened is that there was a guy who led the nationalist army. It was the nationalist and then the communist. The nationalists were the ones who became the Republic of China in Taiwan, and then this was led by a man named Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek basically was an authoritarian ruler, much like Mao Zedong was in the People's Republic of China. And then Chiang Kai-shek was an authoritarian who basically did have a dictatorship at the same time while the communists were there. And then we were the ones that were basically supporting Chiang Kai-shek's dictatorship. You know, just as the United States has always kind of supported dictatorships here and there, we supported the Chiang Kai-shek regime. But then after the death of Chiang Kai-shek, I think it was the death, or he just kind of retired from politics after he got too old. No, actually, I think it was definitely because of his death. After the death of Chiang Kai-shek, he basically, Taiwan basically had this transition from that dictatorship, much like Spain did, I think, in the 70s. So it was around the same time that Spain had this transition to democracy as well. And then once Taiwan basically kind of transitioned from that Chiang Kai-shek dictatorship to a democracy, they've been in the position that they've had a growing economy. They've had less of an influence from the People's Republic of China. And that's whenever we're in the position we're in right now, is that we do have the current president of Taiwan. Let me actually do this. And Tsai Ing-wen is her name. So Tsai Ing-wen has been president of China since 2016. And she was actually elected way earlier than November. Let me go ahead and read some chat real quick. I would just hate to see Taiwan get steamrolled. I absolutely agree. To suggest Canada and China will go to war is ridiculous, says Muse. Hey, what's going on, Muse? I actually haven't seen you in here. AG, so this is about the hostage. The USA asked Canada to arrest this Huawei person, forgot her name. And Canada did what the United States wanted, and in response, the Chinese arrested 2 people for no reason. The United States should give Taiwan and Japan. So that was the situation with the arrests in China. So I guess that was, again, more of a retaliation because of what the United States requested, just from what I'm hearing, but I'll do more research, and possibly we'll talk about it in next stream. The United States should give Taiwan and Japan and South Korea their own anti-Chinese jets, specifically designed to handle Chinese threats, and then a couple of years have them pay for it when they have the money. Sounds like a good idea, but I mean, we sell so many arms to South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, so I mean, basically we're already doing that. Biden invited the de facto ambassador to the United States from Taiwan to the presidential inauguration. Did not hear about that, but if that is true, then that's awesome to see that that Joe Biden does have a policy with Taiwan. Because if he just basically came in and said, like, we're not gonna have a policy with Taiwan, and then if China were to do something against Taiwan and invade them, and then the United States did nothing, that, in my opinion, that's whenever it comes to how I kind of feel about it. The thing about that is that if we, as the United States, had this policy with Taiwan, basically saying, like, we're going to defend you, we're going to defend you, we're going to defend you 3 different times, and then nearly go to war with one of the largest populations on Earth, And then all of a sudden we have an administration that comes in and says, Taiwan, you're on your own. We're not going to do anything if China does anything against you. And they wouldn't directly say that, but basically, if we had the policy that we're not going to do anything, that would be one of the biggest betrayals in world history ever since, I think, of the Munich Agreement. Whenever basically the United Kingdom, France, and Germany got together and said, like, if you can take this specific part of Czechoslovakia, but don't invade anything else. And then Germany comes in and says, okay, we'll take the Sudetenland, and then, less than a year later, we're invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. It would be one of the biggest betrayals since the Munich Agreement. So the fact that we just need a policy, and especially whenever it comes to Taiwan, and that's whenever it comes to how the United States population feels about it. Because if all of a sudden China does invade Taiwan, there would be an anti-war movement basically saying, we don't have the money to go to war. We don't have the means to go to war. Why are we going to war over a small island nation that doesn't do anything for us? There's going to be a lot of people on both sides that are basically going to say, and there's going to be a lot of protests on the street in the United States asking why we're going to war, and then I think it would probably be one of the largest anti-war movements since the Iraq War started, and then probably one of the largest since the Vietnam War. Although proxy wars can't be ruled out and are already happening on some level, do you think the will is there for China to do that now? Possibly. I think there is a little bit of will for China to do it right now, but the strategic value of going to war with the United States, and both know that if China and the United States gets involved to defend one from China, it's a World War III scenario. We're looking at the militaries in the world going to war over one small nation. Are we going to risk a world war, a third world war, over a country that does have a strategic value and has an economic value? What do you guys think? We should start a third world war over Taiwan? Let me go ahead and continue reading on while you guys actually answer that, and then read a little bit of chat. Republicans should block Biden's cabinet picks. Not really talking about that right now. That's true, but policy is going to deter China military action. We all know that they do not have any peaceful plans for the region. Yep, they do not. Would you say you're more focused on foreign policy over your domestic policy, PG? Somewhat. I would say that I am actually a little more inclined toward foreign policy than domestic policy. That's kind of like why I actually enjoy geopolitics a little bit more than regular politics, because geopolitics is a lot of importance, because whenever it comes to geopolitics, it basically means that because what happens on the other side of the world is going to have an effect on the United States sooner or later, whether it happens immediately or whether it happens in a couple of years from now. The growing influence of China will have an effect on not only the military of the United States, but the economy, the how we conduct our business, how we conduct just negotiations with other countries, because it's always going to be about countering that Chinese influence. And that's why it's also about whether we are going to go into a second Cold War, and we're already in the middle of a Cold War. This is just the buildup of the second Cold War, and they're probably not really going to declare that we are in a second Cold War until maybe a couple of years from now, whenever what's going on with the Chinese kind of comes to a head. Isolationist gang, haha, yeah, totally. Any idea that this will cause a war is fantastical. It kind of depends on what happens. I mean, we're basically geared up for one already. The only thing is that whether the United States is going to be, physically, economically, and militarily able to be able to participate in a war like that. Because if it's going to be a world war against the Chinese, that's not going to come at a low cost. It's not going to come at a low economic cost, and it's not going to come at a low human cost. And it's hard to talk about that, but there's a lot of discussion right now about whether a large conflict is coming, and I don't know if I'm gonna get demonetized for talking about all this. So if you guys are able to, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Just hit that super chat if you can, because I'm probably gonna get demonetized for talking about all of this. Hopefully the Chinese don't raid my house and take me prisoner and then take me back to Beijing. If I stop posting for over a couple of months, you'll know that I'm probably in a jail cell in Shanghai or something. We should get rid of allies, says Michael. Well, I wouldn't agree with that. What do you think about the future of Sudan? Since I'm kind of talking about China right now, we could actually have a different discussion about Sudan soon. But Sudan, kind of just real quick, then we'll go ahead and go on with this. I have heard about the whole dam situation with Ethiopia and Sudan, so that's going to be really interesting to see develop over the next couple of years, is whether the Sudanese and the Ethiopians really are going to fight over how much water is coming into Sudan from the river. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, basically, just real quick summary of it. The Ethiopians are building a dam that basically is going to control how much water is going to be flowing into the Nile River. The Nile River starts from Ethiopia and then comes up through the delta into Egypt. And then so Egypt and Sudan are at the forefront of Ethiopia building this dam, and then they are against them building this dam because they want the amount of water that's being supplied by the Nile to be equal throughout all the countries through what they've been getting it through right now. But if the Ethiopians build this dam, they basically will have the situation where the Ethiopians could stop or control the amount of water that's coming through those two countries, and then that would have adverse effects on the populations of those countries. Continue reading chat. The only benefit for the United States right now is Russia. Russia knows that the Chinese cannot be trusted, and the only reason that Russia is siding with China right now is because of the United States. I would actually agree with that, because the strategic value that a Russia-Chinese alliance, and I've actually watched a little bit of a Caspian Report. If you guys don't watch Caspian Report, definitely do watch Caspian Report. He makes some great geopolitical videos. I love watching his stuff. So definitely do recommend watching some Caspian Report if you have not. And he actually said in the Caspian Report that the benefits of a Russia-Chinese alliance are only to counter the United States. But past the United States, their ideologies, their values, they do not have much not really importance. They're going to conflict with each other, because if the Chinese are going to want to get their lands back, there's a lot of land in Russia that the Chinese historically, and they've actually even recently said that we want this land back. And it basically is the region where Vladivostok is, but the region north of Vladivostok, all the way up to just the peninsula, the little panhandle of Russia where Vladivostok is. And I can't really remember the name of this region right now, but it's where Vladivostok is. If you know where Vladivostok is, it's that panhandle right there. It is very possible that China will use its COVID vaccine for political capital to gain influence in Asian countries. Possibly, that is true. Not tuned in for a while. Did PG cover the January 6th? I have not covered the January 6th, mainly because I'm just not going to go there. I'll go ahead and talk about it for a second, because I have not discussed January 6th. January 6th was a culmination of people who basically felt like that there was a lot of lying happening in an election. I'm disappointed that the Supreme Court did not take up the case to talk about whether it was constitutional or not for states to change their election laws right before the election. Clarence Thomas even talked about this yesterday, saying that he's disappointed in that, and I too am disappointed that the Supreme Court did not take up that case. The thing about it is, and even Clarence Thomas talked about this, is that the case that was in mind for that did not contain enough votes to overturn the election. My thoughts on January 6th is that people are trying to dramatize it and catastrophize it to the point to where it looks like it was another 9/11, except it was by our own people. I do not think that those people that raided the Capitol were trying to... I'm going to stop myself right here, because I know for a fact if I continue talking about this, I'm going to get I'm very likely going to lose my channel. What those people... I'm going to say this now. What those people did was disgusting, disrespectful, and one of the worst actions you could have taken. And the fact that a lot of them want to blame Trump for saying he ordered us to do it. He said it. He said to do it. He never said to do it. You need to be responsible for the actions that you took. And then you have a lot of people saying, well, it's because of QAnon. It's because of this. It was because of that. There are so many conflicting opinions that were coming out of that's why I didn't even want to touch it in the first place. And that's why I don't even want to talk about it. Is because basically people on the right were basically saying like, oh, we did it because like, why did you do it? They can't come up with a solid answer of why they would do something like that. So it's just, Trump never explicitly said to do it, but it was almost an inevitable response to what his side has been doing for a long time. I agree, because what Trump basically was doing, and I like Trump's policies. I like what Trump was doing, and I like what he was... I liked his policies. But basically, I believe that the Capitol riot was basically kind of his Watergate. Whenever people think about Trump and think about Trump's legacy, they're finally just going to look at it and they have something to say that was disgusting, because because you can very easily say, oh, well, Trump ordered the what happened at the Capitol. I really don't think that he ordered it. But it's more similar to what Watergate was to Nixon, that it kind of overshadowed the amount of progress that was made during that specific presidency. Nixon goes down as one of my favorite presidents because Nixon did do a lot of great policies. Trump did a lot of great policies, in my opinion. But there were a lot of things that Trump was doing that basically just made him an idiot. And one of the... And again, I'm not going to say that he directly ordered it. I don't believe that he directly ordered it. And I think that people who are blaming Trump for it, who are in jail right now, really shouldn't blame him. They should only blame themselves. Because he didn't order him. He didn't order them to do it. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Trump didn't order them to do it. But then they're saying, like, well, I mean, this is because of a culmination. I do believe it is a culmination, because whenever you say for so long to 78 million people, 75 million people, that the election was stolen from you, people are going to take action. And I don't know if that's what he was planning on wanting to happen all along, but he should have known that people were going to take action whenever you tell people, and then have all of these other conservative media outlets basically telling every single person that voted for Donald Trump that the election was taken from you. But then it comes to the security of the election. Like, why should we... What really got me about it is that, 2016 came around, and then everyone was telling everyone the election was stolen. The election was hacked by the Russians. The Russians did it. The Russian did this. Russian did that. And I'm like, okay, the election possibly was interfered with. We need to make sure that our elections were safe and operable. But then you have all these states that basically changed their election laws several months from the election, after the primaries, for one thing. If they did it before the primaries, hell yeah, that would have been okay. But if you're doing it after the primaries, after the people had already decided who the nominees were going to be, why are you saying this is the safest election in US history, but then telling me that it's okay for these companies to come in and help change election laws and then automatically get everyone to switch to mail-in voting because you're worried about the safety of the election? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with mail-in voting. What I'm saying is that it's questionable. And the fact that you cannot question it, and the fact that I cannot speak freely about it without the risk of my channel getting taken down, is kind of disgusting. I don't understand how that is a good thing to happen. That again, I cannot speak freely about it. Right now I have to quote unquote self-censor because I can't speak freely about it. And I'm not even saying that it's censorship, but it kind of sounds like censorship whenever you talk out loud about it. So it's a tricky subject. On one hand, I think Trump's an idiot. On the other hand, I think what the companies did, what the states did during the election, all of that is questionable and kind of disgusting. Anyway, I just went on a huge tangent. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but let's go ahead and move on. I think I've been talking about Taiwan for a little bit longer than usual. At least I kind of got my opinion down about the CCP and everything. But let me actually go ahead and transition over to this, and then we'll go ahead and get another discussion out. Which of Trump's policies did you like? PoliticsGaming. So whenever it comes to policies, I believe that some of Trump's... Let me actually go ahead and pull up a couple of his policies, and then I'll go ahead and talk about a couple of them at length. But one of my favorite policies about him was basically about... And I'm not one of those, like, aha, America first, but it was kind of like, I kind of did support the America first part of it, because America first to me basically was just about putting America before other countries. And a lot of people did call that isolationism. But on one hand, whenever you feel like, and I mean, it always comes down to whether you feel and then what's actually happening. What I saw wow, my voice cracked there. What I saw happening was that America was basically, and I love Obama, but I think America's standing in the military, in foreign policy, in economic aspects during the Obama administration kind of did go downhill, mainly. And Obama was very well intentioned, especially with Obamacare. He tried his hardest to try and get our healthcare system to work. However, there was too much government overreach, and then that government overreach ended up making healthcare inadvertently way too expensive for a lot of people, because a lot of people basically were being fined for not having health insurance at all. So, you want your healthcare system to work, but then it's like you're taxing people for not being able to afford healthcare, but then you kind of force them onto the government-run healthcare system that you had before. I actually had family that were even on it was called the Affordable Healthcare Act. They could not afford the Affordable Healthcare Act. You could see it as self-censoring or see it as actually thinking before saying something that shouldn't be said. Well, it kind of depends on what you think about that, because basically what I was trying to say is that it's not something that shouldn't be said. It's just like, I have to, because basically the policy of a lot of Google, Facebook, YouTube, their policy is basically like, if you talk about this at all, then we're going to get rid of you. We're going to hit your channel with demonetization, or even we're gonna take down your channel if you even talk about this. So it's kind of more along the lines of me having to self-censor, because I want to talk about what people were talking about, but I can't talk about it because I'm going to lose my channel because I'm talking about it. Because there was a couple of YouTube channels that I was watching that was pushing the election conspiracy, and I call it a conspiracy. I do not believe that. I think there was a couple of fraudulent votes out there. There's obviously going to be fraudulent votes out there, but it's not going to be to the point to where it's going to overturn the election. And a lot of people did want the election to be overturned, and I disagree with that. But at the same time, trying to say, well, we know the correct information and you need to believe that correct information because we tell you that information is correct. Why should I believe a monopoly over smaller institutions that don't have control and don't want that larger control, because they are also being controlled by those larger companies? It's basically kind of like an oligarchy where the information is being controlled by only a couple of different companies: Facebook, YouTube, Google, Apple. All of those companies have control over more than 70% of the companies that exist in the United States. And they control the information too. That's what I question. F that Biden won fair and square, and they need to push on with a genuine progressive agenda. I do believe that Biden won fair and square. But I also think that it is questionable about changing those election laws, which could have an adverse advantage toward either one or the other. So that's kind of where I question it, whether there is an advantage that you're giving toward one candidate or the other whenever you do change those election laws before the election. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking about that. We've already discussed it a little bit long enough. Hey, what's going on, Beach? Welcome to the live stream. Let me go ahead and get a couple of discussions up. Speaking of Trump's policies, let me actually go ahead and get this. Then I'll go ahead and bring the screen back, and then it's going to be the last discussion we're going to have before I go ahead and end this live stream. So, basically with Trump's policies, let's go ahead and discuss a couple of Trump's policies. There's a couple of them that I do disagree with. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of Trump policies that I did disagree with. So, abortion, I never really kind of agreed with abortion. I self-identify as right-wing, but one of the things that I do not identify right-wing on is abortion. Abortion is never going to be the one that I'm going to agree with, because I believe I hold more of a libertarian view whenever it comes to abortion. I believe that people should have the right to do what they want with themselves, whether it has to pertain with their body or anything. But on the issue of abortion, it's always going to be a special case, because I believe that with abortion, people should know what the hell they're doing. And if you're just using abortion as a legitimate form of birth control because you just don't want to have a baby, I don't think that abortion should be used for that. I think that there are other ways that you can control your body without necessarily aborting it entirely. You know, there's birth control pills out there. There's morning after pills out there. You can use those as legitimate forms of just preventing yourself from having a baby. And those options are there. And then plus, there's condoms out there. Condoms exist. The men should be using the condoms. And then the woman should be able to say, hey, make sure you use a condom because I don't want to have a kid. The guy should also be able to do that too. But whenever it comes to things like rape, obviously you cannot ask your rapist to say, hey, put a condom on before you rape me. That's just doesn't happen. So whenever it comes to rape, absolutely I believe that there should be an option for an abortion, because you did not ask to be raped, you did not ask to be pregnant. But then people do have babies after being raped. So it's obviously going to, again, become the woman's choice to have that baby. Whenever it comes to mental disabilities, that becomes a harder question, because if it's Down syndrome, if it's autism, if it's something, there's a lot of kids out there that live with that and that are fine. I mean, I was up close and personal whenever I was in school with special needs. I did not have special needs. I was with kids with special needs, and there were... It was just... They're not bad kids, and I don't understand why a lot of people would want to justify saying, well, he has Down syndrome, so I don't want him. But then it comes to adoption, you know, just have the kid, especially if he has autism or Down syndrome. If you legitimately are not going to take care of that kid, especially whenever they are special needs, put that kid up for adoption. Gonna go on from abortion right here. So then, if we actually talk about foreign policy, Trump's foreign policy kind of did retract America from a lot of different aspects in the world. However, I disagree that you would call it... Let me go ahead and just be honest real quick. I actually said something a second earlier. whenever I was younger, and this is kind of just being a little bit more personal, and this is going to be the first time that I've ever actually kind of admitted this publicly on my YouTube channel. Whenever I was younger, I actually was diagnosed with autism. So living with myself as someone who is diagnosed with autism, and being in with kids who had similar disabilities, and I may not sound like it, I may not look like it, and that's what I've been told throughout my entire life, is I don't look like it and I don't sound like it. And it's always kind of been a confusing subject for me, because they actually kind of retracted the diagnosis whenever I was in high school. So that's kind of like where it kind of gets confusing for me, because like sometimes I do show the signs of it, and then that's whenever it comes into my interest in politics and geopolitics and the news, everything. And autistic people basically have this thing where they basically have more of an interest in certain subjects, more so than other people. So that's, again, it's more of a touchy subject for me. ZK Gaming, I thank you for saying that. For those who are saying that they do, I thank you for kind of like I've been interested in TMS and TDCS as possible autism treatments lately. And see, that's the other question, is like, do you want to say like autistic people need treatment or whatever? But sometimes they do need more of, sometimes autistic people do need more help than other people. But then it comes to the question about abortion. Do you think that that person should abort them just because they were diagnosed with autism and will live with autism for the rest of their lives? Should that be a legitimate cause as a birth defect because you don't want to have an autistic kid? So I think some aspects would be worth improving. I know that's controversial. I mean, if you have it yourself and you can say like, I have this and I believe that there should be some aspects of it that should be improved, I mean, I kind of understand that. Anyway, so I thank those for watching right now. I kind of never really wanted to say that before, but I know there's a lot of people that are out there that have it, and I mean, if there's one person, if you're watching me and you've been watching me for a couple of years and you have it, and then I also have it, it's just kind of like one of those representation things, I guess, that there are other people out there that have it, especially YouTubers. I know there's a lot of autistic YouTubers that are out there, so it's always kind of cool to see that, at least in my view. Anyway, a couple other things about Trump's policies. I actually really enjoyed his Elaine Chao. She was the Secretary of Infrastructure, or not infrastructure, of Transportation. And transportation and energy have always kind of been my forefront of, whenever it comes to the domestic policy, transportation and energy are always going to be my number one departments. I think that infrastructure and energy are some of the most important aspects of our way of life, because if we don't have an utmost if we don't have like a utmost investment into those priorities, then I don't think we're going to get very far into the future, because we need infrastructure. Obviously, we need energy, we need, and I think if you've been watching me long enough, you'll know that I believe that whenever it comes to energy, solar and wind are not going to carry us that far. They're going to be good because they don't use CO2. They don't produce CO2. I mean, they actually use CO2 in a couple of regards, but every construction project always uses CO2 somehow, so it's always going to be a carbon footprint there unless we're using electric vehicles and blah, 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 blah. It's very complicated. Anyway, whenever it comes to energy, if we want to take climate change seriously, we need an utmost investment into nuclear energy. We are not going to get that far with climate change if we don't have a massive investment into nuclear energy. And if we don't see that wind and solar only produce, like, they don't produce that much right now. And I mean, even if we invest maybe $1 trillion into them, we're not going to get that far. Nuclear energy is going to be one of the biggest solutions for climate change, as climate change does cause a lot of the issues that we're going through right now. I believe that climate change was a factor into what happened in Texas last week, and climate change is going to be some sort of priority or threat within the next 20 years. So if we want to take climate change seriously and actually fight climate change, then I believe that nuclear energy is going to be the answer. If Texas had maybe 3 or 4 more nuclear power plants, even 2 to 3 more nuclear reactors online whenever that snowstorm hit, I don't think Texas would have had that energy crisis. We went through an entire energy crisis where millions of Texans were out of power because of, for one, gas plants. I'm not going to blame this on, as a lot of, Fox News and a lot of other people, I'm not going to blame this on wind turbines and solar plants. They were a factor because they froze up during the snowstorm, but it's not the fault of wind turbines because they only produce maybe less than 10, solar and wind produce maybe less than 10-15% of the electricity in Texas. Texas is a gas state. We have natural gas that goes through the entire state. We have so many different pipelines in the state of Texas, it's impossible to count them unless you're working in that field. So one of the things about that is that if we had a couple more, if our gas lines were winterized, which they were not, and that's the reason why we got into that situation, is because the gas lines froze up. So if we at least had a couple more nuclear reactors, our equipment was winterized, we wouldn't have had the crisis that we had. And Texas just is always kind of lagging in a couple of different regards whenever it comes to energy and whenever it comes, because I mean, we're, number one in the country whenever it comes to oil production, but then whenever it comes to actually trying to prevent natural disasters from happening, we do lag a lot. And millions of Texans figured that out last week. Whenever we lost power, we lost water. I actually personally did not lose power during that entire snowstorm. It was actually kind of weird because, everyone else that I knew was losing power and losing water, but I never lost power. The worst thing that we had to do is that we had to boil water in order to, not get sick whenever we drank tainted water. And we had to boil our water. So that was the worst thing that happened to me during that whole entire snowstorm. But I believe that climate change did have a little bit of a factor into that. It's not like, climate change is doing something and then that just causes everything. Whenever I blame climate change for it, I'm basically saying, like, the climate is changing. We are seeing that the humanity has had an adverse effect on the climate, and then that's a consequence of it, and that's just what happens. Climate change just basically means it's not about global war. It's not about the Earth like becoming uninhabitable. It's just that we're going to go through more and more disastrous and worse storms than we've really gone through in our recorded history. And we are going to spend a lot more money on trying to fix it whenever those actually happen, instead of spending the money that we have now to prevent that from happening, or at least lowering the effect that we are going to see in the future. The extent of the human effect is somewhat up for debate. I actually agree with that too, because on one hand, yes, it is a natural occurrence. On the other hand, humanity does have a hand in it. To say that humanity has no effect on the climate, that you are either ignorant, or you are lying, or you just don't have a knowledge of history, of climate, of anything. And I'm not sitting here, I'm not saying that I'm a climatologist. I most certainly am not, but I have had a lot of interest into in climate and weather and a lot of that, and that's where I've kind of gotten my knowledge into climate and weather and climate change, as a matter of fact, just because of the amount of research that I've poured into weather events, into just the history of weather. You shouldn't trust people like John Kerry on climate change, since he regularly rides in private jets. I wouldn't say just not trust him. The thing about that is like, I mean, the president of the United States is riding around in a gas-guzzling 747. So, I mean, until, like, you know, I mean, and then, I mean, President Biden wants to say, like, you know, we need to figure out what we're gonna do. Like, until they can actually make electric airplanes, I mean, we need to get around the world in one way or another. And I don't know. It's kind of like a hard ask for you to say, oh, like, why should I listen to someone? Why should I listen to someone who uses a private jet whenever I don't have a private jet? If you had the money to get a private jet, would you get a private jet? And would you use that as a means of transportation instead of having to deal with I keep hitting my mic. Instead of having to deal with airport security and everything, all you have to do is just go to the airport, get on your plane, and get out. Yeah, I don't think electric airplanes are going to happen anytime soon. Until there's going to be a way that we can actually get across the planet without using gas, or, you know, ripping apart the ozone layer with rockets that are going to be getting from one area of the planet to the other. I mean, the reason we had to stop using the Concorde was because of the adverse effect it was having on the air that it was flying through, because it was flying so high in the air and it was pouring so much gas into the atmosphere that it was actually kind of killing the ozone layer. And we had to stop using and retire the Concorde because of what it was doing to the environment. So until there is a way for us to stop using, you know, gas entirely, we're going to be producing CO2. That's why a lot of people want to lessen the amount of CO2 that we do through carbon taxes, through industrial pollution taxes. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that a lot of people are wanting to stop using CO2 through. Car usage has been reduced and would be beneficial in many ways, reducing obesity rates as well as emissions. Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of different kind of I read something about car usage, and there was like, I think there was something that they were inventing that basically, like, if they did invent it, then it would be like putting 30 million cars into the road again. But I would have to look back on it. If we want to decrease car usage, you'd have to encourage public transport and mass urbanization with mixed zoning. Yeah, and I think I think that's what Berkeley, California is actually doing. I actually saw something about Berkeley basically saying that they're saying goodbye to they're saying they're not gonna, like, any new projects they're gonna be doing, they're not gonna be building any more single family homes. Viewing conservation in these cold scientific way misses the point. To convince people that the environment is important, you need to appeal to emotions, not facts. But then that's all you see now. I mean, that's all you see, is that people are appealing to the emotions so much now. Is that's why a lot of people are tired, and appealing to the emotions has become a political thing now, because a lot of people view whenever you appeal to your emotions that it's going to be a left-wing thing. At least in the United States, that's how we see it now. That's how a lot of people see it, is that it's more of a, you know, if you're going to appeal to my emotions, it better be about something good. And then if it's about the environment, especially whenever it's about like that, but then, I mean, it's like, well, your kids are going to be living in this, and then your grandkids, and then their kids, and then their kids, and then their kids. Like, appealing to the emotions now has become such a political aspect. Appealing to the emotions just doesn't work anymore. It's going to have to happen through some other way. And I'm here to discuss it. I'm not here necessarily to give answers. I'm not here to kind of like tell you guys what's going on. I'm just here to discuss it. They're always appealing to science, though. I actually saw something about this the other day, and this is about science, and I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. I've been streaming for about an hour and a half. So I'll go ahead and talk about this. Appealing to science. Science has become political now. Science, whenever we were growing up, whenever we were talking about science, and whenever science has always been about, you know, it's always been about a hypothesis. This is how we grew up, is that we were never told whenever we were growing up that science was something where if a scientist says something, then it, just because they say that doesn't make it true. Basically, science has just been about, you find something, you look at it, if there's a consensus, and with climate change, scientists do think, and there's a scientific consensus saying the climate is changing and it's because of humanity. Nowadays, people use science to push narratives, no innovation. Yeah, that's exactly why. Science right now, this is just talking about right now, it's not about innovation anymore. And I mean, there's a lot of innovation going on with science. I'm not saying it's not happening. But basically, it's always about scientists say this, so you should believe it and change your ways because scientists say it. There's no room for questioning anymore. And that's what science has always been about, is questioning. Say, I don't believe the climate is changing. Then tell them this, and this. It doesn't matter how complicated it sounds. It doesn't matter. You don't need to dumb it down. Just say, the climate is changing because of this, and this. Okay. I mean, have a discussion with them. Don't just say, and especially right now with people who basically, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to this. Basically right now, it's about what the scientists say, and then a lot of people just kind of buy into it. People who don't understand science, who don't understand about what just people who really didn't care about it before. And this is whenever it comes into, you know, a lot of discussion about like how people are now. Because basically it's always about, and I see this happen more with left-wing people than right-wing people, because right-wing people are basically saying, you know, oh, well, climate change doesn't exist, or scientists are lying. I'm basically seeing on the right now that they're more saying, like, you know, scientists are lying and blah, 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 like they're being paid to say this, blah, 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 and that's why I can't really buy into that part. But people on the left, they basically, who really, or not really people, I'm not going to say people on the left, people who buy into the climate change thing and are activists about it, basically what they are doing now is that they possibly just, look at a couple of different sources from various different websites that have motives themselves, and then they repeat those views, and then if anyone kind of disagrees with those views, then they're basically saying like, oh, well, I mean, I've done my research and blah 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 blah. They don't really leave room for like what science is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about a consensus. It's supposed to be like, if you disagree with me, here are like 11 different reasons why. It's kind of like discussing politics. Like, if you disagree with me, these are the facts supporting my thing. But then it's like, with climate change, it's always just about scientists say this, so that means it's true. No, that's not how science works. And but then it comes to, I keep hitting my mic. But then it comes to like, yes, scientists are saying that. There is a scientific consensus. And I am not saying climate change does not exist. I've already discussed my position on climate change. I absolutely do think that climate change is a very big threat to us. But I don't think that people should be forced into believing into it just because, a scientist that I've never heard of in my life tells me that I should believe them because they're smarter than me. So there should be a better way for us to explain scientific endeavors and the science of climate change to people. But then the people themselves, especially people who don't believe in climate change or believe that, like, humanity doesn't have that much of an effect onto it, they need to do that. But you're asking a lot, especially in this day and age with how much politics has just become toxic now. You're asking a lot for people to just agree, and that's not where I'm leaving it at. I'm not basically saying, oh, people just need to agree with each other. No, I'm not saying that at all. But people who basically deny it need to figure out, okay, why is the weather different now? Like, especially if they're like 40, 50, 60 years old, they went through some of the worst climate disasters so many years ago. And I mean, even then, some of it is different. I mean, some of the climate that was there in the 70s and 80s, I mean, it doesn't, just compared to today, it doesn't seem like they want to. I'm trying to figure out a way to word it, and then I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that people who don't believe in climate change need to figure out why they don't believe in it. Because if you're just saying that you don't want to believe in it because a scientist told you so, you're not being that smart there, because you're basically saying, oh, well, because someone doesn't say it. But what I'm also saying is, like, just because a website tells you to, and a lot of people who don't believe in climate change, the amount of people who don't believe in climate change has gone up ever since the internet has become more important in our lives. So just because, you can find so many websites that tell you climate change is real, climate change is real, climate change is real, and then you can find like the 2 or 3 websites that tell you climate change is not real, climate change is not real, climate change is not real, you're not really building a case there, because you're just finding the cases that say, support your fact that you're right, but then you're not looking at the cases where you're, what's your point though? You should believe what you're told. That's how the Nazis routed support so quickly. And see, that's where I'm kind of like having an intersection. That's why I kind of started going like, wait, hang on. Because my point is basically like, you should be able to question what a scientist says, but you also shouldn't sit there and say, well, this isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real, because of like the 5 different sources that you found that support your point, but then ignore, like, you know, the 20 other points, that 20 other sources that basically are against your point, saying that climate change doesn't exist. So I'll go ahead and leave that right there. Guys, if you guys like this, go and leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want to see more kind of, you know, discussion live streams where I'm not really playing any games or anything, if you want to see more stuff like this, definitely do hit that subscribe button and tell me what you think in the comments below. The Nazis understand, well, the Nazis got in power with huge popular support. There was a lot of different things that went into the Nazis getting into the power. That would be a whole different video by itself. Like, there's so many different aspects that were happening that got the Nazis into power. So kind of comparing it to the Nazis doesn't really make any sense historically. Anyway, yeah, everyone that is watching right now, go ahead and join the Discord if you have not, if you want to discuss more things about this. And in the next, you know, PG stream, I need to figure out what to call these if I'm going to have more of these. But we are going to discuss more politics, geopolitics, and news in the future. If you guys want to see more of this, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Join the Discord, and I'll see you guys there.